Are live. Grace, would you like to kick it off?
Of course. So Rocky has long lived a life of service ever since she was a 13-year-old advocating for the undocumented immigrants in her community. And then Florence is the author of 2 books of young adult fiction. Her work experiencing ranges from publishing in New York City to farming in Maine to one really bad holiday shift at UPS. And then lastly, Andrew is the award-winning author of several young adult novels. He is native-born Californian who spends most of his formative years traveling the world.
So this is great. I am Linda Maroney. I am a board member of this amazing festival and also the co-founder of the Rochester Teen Film Festival. And today we are going to be talking about a really fun subject, overcoming obstacles and dealing with writer's block, which obviously is not funny really at all in the moment, but hopefully looking back, it maybe is. And maybe we can find some tricks and things to talk about. Do you guys have other words than writer's block? Like, is there a better way that you categorize this?
I use words like resistance, rebellion, because sometimes I feel like we're in active war. So yeah, but I think there's so many words, and I think that sometimes sometimes it does feel like you really are armoring up to head into battle, and other times it's just like this lull that you sort of have to wade through. So
I like pit of despair. That really speaks to where I usually end up.
For me, I mean, I don't like the term writer's block because I know that everybody is capable of doing something that takes you a step forward. What I struggle with most of all is the distance between my writing and myself. And when that starts to get far, when I feel like my writing is getting outside of myself too far, that's the time when that's when I struggle the most, I think. It's I've been attempting to try to kind of rein that in and bring that back and bring myself closer to what I love to do, and that helps me I think overcome those times when you're gonna have slow down periods, and you're gonna have also those manic periods too. It's just a normal part of the process, I think.
Well, that brings us to the idea of process. Like, when it happens, does it happen usually in a specific phase of the process, or is it before you're starting a new project, or is it midway through that you get stuck and don't want to fully let go of it? Or, I know it happens to writers, it happens to anyone in the creative fields, right? This is a very universal thing that we're talking about, but do you find that there is a phase in the process that this happens? And if so, where for you?
In my experience, and I'm sorry for answering first. I don't want to answer first next time. It's on you too. But it's like at 25,000 words. I call that like the Sargasso Sea. It's where you're sailing along and then all of a sudden you've got no wind and you're just totally surrounded by seaweed, and you're in the middle of the ocean. You're going, how did I get here? And when am I going to get out? But it always happens like at the 25,000 word mark. I don't know why, but that's where I hit it.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I wish I knew when to expect it. I feel like that would help, but no, it just comes up out of the blue. I'll be chugging along with the story, and then it just stops, and then I can't write anything. I can't figure out what comes next. I start to reread stuff, and it all looks terrible. We descend into the pit of despair. This is never going to work. I don't know why I thought I could be a writer. Then I take a couple days off because I'm never going to write anything ever again. So why even worry about it? I'm just going to go sit behind my computer. That's fine. And then there'll be like a little inkling of an idea. And I'll be like, maybe I'll write that down. Like, no, I swore off writing. I can't. But then ultimately, all of this is to say, I have a whole cycle, and I know the cycle when it starts, and I can pinpoint that I'm at the pit of despair and the cycle, but I still can't get my brain to believe that I'll ever write anything ever again. So I don't know. I would really be interested if there are any writers who don't experience writer's block, but for me, it seems very much like just part of the process.
I find that in my part of the process that for each project, it comes at different times, or it will just pop up at each one of those. So one is usually writing the first like 5 pages is the most fun, like the blooming of an idea, right? And then I get to around there, I'm like, can I really write this story? Do I really have what it takes? And it's that sort of imposter syndrome. And that will sort of plague me towards the beginning. And then in the last like 75% mark, when I've like pushed through, I've like decided I can do it. And I get towards the end, I'm like, this will never end. It will never be a whole book. Like, I've written, X amount of words, but the end, like last X is just impossible. And then, you buckle up and you do it. But those the beginning, like convincing myself I'm worthy or capable of telling the story. And then towards the end is that I actually have the capacity to finish it. Like I haven't run out of words. Like my quota is not done yet. Those are the 2 points where I find most often I get plagued by the resistance.
Rocky, do you ever feel like when you're getting towards the end of something that you just don't want it to end? Because if it ends, then you're going to have to do something really hard, which is start something new.
It's rude, honestly. No, it's true. I find also, especially, and I think, a lot of the people that I've been on panels with is, especially when you're wrapping up a story that feels really raw or really vulnerable or really intimate, finishing is sort of signaling the acknowledgement that soon after that will be other people reading this. And I think there's this internal struggle of, aching to be seen, and then also fear of being seen. And I think that materializes in, self-sabotaging behavior. And so also, when you really love a book and its characters, you're in love with them, and to sort of acknowledge that they don't exist beyond the page can be somewhat painful. And so leaving a story behind can, you can delay the ending. It's sort of like when I read books that I love and I don't want to finish them because I'm not ready to let go yet.
It's like when you finish, you're getting a one-way ticket out of that world and you're never going to come back.
Yeah. I struggled to write my book that came out. I wanted to like do stuff with it, like make graphics and whatnot around excerpts of it. But I find it's a struggle to go back in and read all the way through, because you were like in the trenches with it for so long. And once you let it go, it's like, okay, well, now it's the world's. It's not mine anymore.
I feel that.
So Florence, you have a couple of books out already, right? I think I'm a couple steps behind you.
Yeah, no, Dear Universe was my second book. It came out last year, right when the pandemic was like really getting juicy. And then Love and Other Carnivorous Plants came out in 2017, I think. I just finished a third one that I'm trying to sell. So that's always a fun reminder that I am trying to make a living as an artist. Yay!
I'm right behind you.
So going back for a second, now that you all have more than one book out here, is it easier when you get into those moments of block, the pit of doom, the pit of abyss? What was that? I forget already. Do you get through it and think, okay, I know where I am now. This is part of the process too, and I just need to power through and get through it? Or is it still, it just still freezes you in your tracks every time and think, okay, maybe this is it?
I think all experiences are, any painful experience requires presence. And so like it can still be painful, like no matter when you get to it, it can still be painful or hard or difficult, you know, whatever you know, adjectives you want to attach to that. So I don't necessarily think that like being in it is less hard, but I think the power of perspective helps in that, knowing that at some point in this process I'll be able to dig deep and push through. There's comfort to that knowing,
Yeah.
which, you know, I wouldn't have had prior to, you know, finishing up my first draft of a book, right? You know, you don't know if you have the capacity until you've proven it to yourself. So having sort of evidence that you can push through is really helpful, even if it doesn't make it easier when you experience it the next time.
A viewer wants to know if you have any advice on how to sort of push through, or maybe sort of tips or tricks that you use when you're experiencing any sort of block.
Word count helps me. I'll say I'm just going to write 100 words, just 100. Maybe it's just 10, maybe it's just 1. It sounds like numerical and like not creative, but at the end of the day, like writing is about, you do have to get words down on the page, and sometimes I can't even conceptualize what they would be, if they, let alone if they'd be any good. So kind of making the bare minimum, asking really the lowest possible thing of myself really, really helps. Because if a book is maybe say 70,000 words, if you wrote 100 words a day, you could have a very lousy book, but it would indeed be a book, at the end of whatever that divided by 70,000 is.
I find that that every book, and I don't want to be the old guy, but I mean, I my 14th novel came out during the height of the pandemic, and it's like kind of like every book is a totally different process, and so every book also hits you in different ways, and so when that thing happens, that thing has to be addressed, I think, every time in a unique way. And so for me, I mean, I knew when I moved here about 30 years ago that this was the place to write. And I ended up being correct. I mean, I live in the mountains, and so I go out, I'll take my dogs up in the hills, or I'll go for a run. I'll go out and hang out with my horses or my donkeys, or I'll play music. I'll do something, or I'll do art. I'm a terrible artist, and I don't know why anybody would ever put my artwork in a book, but they've done it. And or I'll draw something, or I'll do something else that kind of makes my brain make connections in a different but yet organic way. And that's the only trick that I have. But I totally agree with Florence that says, that if you can just get 10 words, Henry James said something about if you just get one perfect sentence in a book, that's really glorious for a writer to do. And so, yeah, just one great sentence in a day, or 10 words, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, maybe the pipe is unclogged and you're doing something.
All of that is so important. I think that, having word counts, a lot of times we see, articles or people talking about 1,000 words a day, right? But I think making it something that's so manageable, like it feels like it's so small that, oh yeah, of course I could do that. It's the practice of showing up for yourself in the page that, again, offers you evidence that you can continue to do that. Also doing activities that are unrelated to writing, like Andrew was saying, with, going for horseback riding, or doing music, or doing art, like distracting your mind or even disrupting the monotony or the mundane of the moment. I feel like disruption is such a powerful source of inspiration. And letting your mind go and be free for a bit instead of like tethered to this pressure of performance, right? Another thing that I have done for every story I've started, and this has been consistent. There are also other things that I'll suggest for playing, but I always write my dream 5-star review before I start a project, and I write it from the perspective of who I'm writing this book for and what they love about it and what they took from it and the words like that they use about why they like the writing, why they like the character. It's a long thing. But what happened for me, and I remember I hit this point when I was revising A Breath Too Late for my agent, where I really felt like I couldn't go forward with it. Because it was very intimate and very raw and very vulnerable for me to write. Was I looked at that 5-star review and I thought about the person I was writing for. Like I start to write for myself, but in the end, I'm writing for someone else. And so to be reminded that whatever you're writing, fantasy, realistic fiction, something lighthearted, something very dark, you're writing it for someone ultimately. Like all the teens here that are picking up our books, like we're writing for them. And to be reminded that, and that gives me a sense of urgency. And that sort of drives me forward in allowing myself to create the small writing goals, right? Other things I feel like are really helpful is, and that I love, I see teen readers do this all the time, is like creating soundtracks for your books or creating like an aesthetic for your book or creating a dream board for your book or creating, just like pulling pieces of, materials, something that you can feel, something that feels tangible, like pulling that together because, it may not be showing up for a writing count, but it is showing up for the story. I remember having a mentor who made me do that. She made me do like this Pinterest style collage of just like textures and feelings and everything that would go into that story. And it made my brain think differently and it gave it a bit more nuance than I was anticipating. And that sort of gave like a back door into this story that I hadn't anticipated. So be really, I think, playing, because a lot of times we forget, like we associate so much with pressure and performance that we forget that, we love this because we can play, on the page too. And so allowing that into your creative practice is important.
Gosh, I wish I would have been able to hear both of you talk about this about 15 years ago. You guys have great ideas.
Thank you.
I like the one where, because there's different types of writer's block I've noticed. There's a block when I'm writing a novel already. Then there can be a block between projects. And those are two very different blocks that come with different types of panic. And when it's the panic of being blocked in a story, something that my editor was like, why don't you just write the ending instead? Or like write a scene you're excited about. It doesn't have to be chronological. And I know that was one thing that kind of blew my mind. It was like, oh, okay, I don't have to be like trudging through the mundanity of this particular section. I could write something that I'm excited about, and like it's okay if it's out of order. So that's one thing, like for a specific project. But like being between projects and being blocked, that is like very, very scary on a whole different level to me. And I think actually, Rocky, you were saying something about like the practice of writing. And that's when like I really try to focus on writing as this thing that I return to frequently, whether it's every day or every other day or most times of the week, whatever. And that doesn't always look the same. And that's okay because I'm just practicing. I'm here to like, okay, this is what my daily writing practice looked like today. I wrote 10 words and they were all help. And then, basically that's just what it is. That's just one day of practice. I know people who do it with like meditation or with yoga, but I like applying it to writing as well, instead of being so focused on, is this actually going towards a book or towards a story or towards getting published, or my last analogy. I was feeling really discouraged. Like I was writing in between writing a first book and a second book. And I had written 2 almost whole books that both got scrapped because they just like were bad, frankly. And it was very, very discouraging. And finally, my thought process became, if you look at like star athletes, like they play in a game for maybe 2 hours, right, of a week, say, and then all the hours that they practice that don't get any showtime. Anyway, it was just helpful to conceptualize that, like, there's no way everything I write could possibly be useful, right? It's practice.
I love that. I love that around the sports piece is, and you think about that for people that perform on a stage, or when we watch a movie, like these things that people like gravitate towards, they get a glimpse of it. They don't see all of the hours that went into it. I remember Ellen Hopkins was talking about how she started Crank in prose, and that she realized like it wasn't working that way, and it went through its evolution to become in verse, which is now what we know her for. And sometimes it's just a matter of creating the practice so we have the space to evolve into whatever we need to.
Do you both write every day? No? One no, one yes.
Yeah, I don't write every day, but I do have I don't write every day because I find that my natural rhythms require space of not writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have seasons where I write Monday through Friday. Now, before it was whenever I could get a spare moment. But now I write Monday through Fridays in certain seasons, and then I let go and say, I don't have to write right now, but I'm always with story. So if I'm not writing, then I'm doing all those other things that I was talking about.
True enough. I think that a lot of people, because I'm sure everyone gets this question a lot of times from young people about what do you do about writer's block. And I think that's because a lot of people consider that what we do is always in front of a page or at our keyboard, but actually a lot of our job is like that time that's spent in practice for an athlete. We're always writing in our heads, or we're absorbing things by observing what's going on around us and by bumping into things. And that's part of what we do too. And sometimes I think that if the focus is too much on what you're doing on your keyboard or on a piece of paper, then it's obvious that you're going to get blocked, right? But if you also look at writing, the big picture of writing as also going up in the hills and just being in nature, or going to a grocery store and mentally criticizing people who don't know how to wear masks, those kinds of things, all of that contributes to what we do, right?
Absolutely.
So writing rituals, do you have any writing rituals, and what might they be? And do you use them when you get into these moments, or is that another time when you change things up? And obviously it's different person to person and book to book or piece to piece, but you can generalize here a bit for yourselves.
I feel like every year my writing ritual has changed, and every book also is changed. So like right now, my work in progress is about a Latina drag racer. And so I get really hyped up, like sort of like I pregame my writing by watching female drag racers and watching their stories and hearing them talk about themselves, and watching like things on Netflix that are all like around racing and whatnot. And that energizes me, and then I can write. And I also feel like that helps with the voice because it's so adrenaline filled that it gets you into that space. For breath, you know, a lot of it, you know, it's from a perspective of a girl living with depression, or who lived with depression. And I one of my daily practices is journaling, and journaling not like what happened in my day, but journaling my feelings and processing them on the page. And that's sort of my anchor in the world. That's one of the things I use in my arsenal for managing my own depression. And so A Breath Too Late is written in letters. And so a lot of even some of those journaling pieces led to writing because I was already in the emotion. So I think I find something that generates the feeling I need for the writing I'm about to dive into. And then when I'm really stuck, then I do 5 or 10 or 15-minute writing sprints, like really small writing sprints, just to be like, I did it. I need to constantly create evidence in my head that I did it. Like, I'm proud of myself for this thing. And then that gives me, again, more confidence to keep going.
That goes back to the whole athlete scenario, right? That you're doing these sprints.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Florence?
I write in the mornings mostly. Yeah, with coffee. Sometimes I'll write on the computer. Sometimes I need to do it by hand. Sometimes it's working on a book, but I also write poetry. So it might be a poem. It might just be a free write. Like, I sometimes set a timer for like 5 or 7 minutes, and the whole goal is that I have to keep the pen to the paper. It doesn't matter if I'm writing, I don't know. The whole point is to just actually physically do it for a short amount of time. So I guess, yeah, I don't work on projects every day. That would not be sustainable for me. I have to take breaks, kind of like what you were saying, Rocky, like, that's impossible. But I find it's very rare for a day to go by that I haven't written in some way, shape, or form that's for me.
I love that. I want to adopt that practice now.
For me, I think rituals, I mean, like I write, I keep notes, I mean, that nobody could ever understand. They're kind of in code. And then also I write on Microsoft Word, and I make comments to myself when I'm writing. And one of my greatest fears is that one day I'm going to send in a version of a novel with my comment where I'm talking to myself in the margins. I'll send that to my agent or my editor, and then will want to change my identity and leave the country. So, but that's what I do ritual wise.
Are you hard on yourself in the comments, or is it just,
yeah. I mean, like there's in the novel that I've been writing for the whole pandemic, there's one page and the whole side of it is just one comment where I'm just saying, I just want you, talking to me, to remember how much effing time you spent on this one page over and over and over. And yeah, I really don't want anyone to ever see that comment, but I do save my versions with comments for myself. And one day, some powerful therapist will get me to actually go back and look at the things I've said to myself when I was younger.
That is such a cool ritual. I think that is, because I feel like I wish I had that sort of archive of my thoughts to myself, especially when I was writing things for the first time. And then in revision, I think that's so cool. I love that. I would also fear it being sent anywhere.
Yeah, it's like the accidental reply all or something. Oh my God.
What about worst case? writer's block. Can you share with us or recount it? Like, what was the worst experience you've had?
All right, I'm going to be a real downer here. My last novel, my editor passed away. And I was very, very close to him. We had a very close relationship. And so while I was working, and I was only writing these 2 novels just for him. He asked me to. And so I said, yes, I will do it. And then he passed away. And so that, talk about being orphaned, that's like the worst case scenario of being orphaned. And so, yeah, so it was really hard for me to get myself to feel like finishing that novel. And thankfully I did, but still that was the worst case scenario of just not wanting to look at that thing ever again. Sorry to crush the spirit of here.
Well, it's not the same, but in terms of being in this sort of piggybacking on this conversation, I mean, one is, of course, that would be devastating. So you wouldn't want to return to that at the moment. For me, writing Breath, which is all around suicide, domestic violence, and depression, there was a point, it was November, I think 2017. And I was going through a very, very long lasting depressive spiral. And I was having a very difficult time pulling out of it personally. And so I really didn't want to write. I didn't want to write this story. It was for my agent. It was a revision for my agent. It was before selling my debut novel, all of that. So I had no evidence that it would ever get anywhere, right? And so I kind of was in this, like, I just want to give up type feel. And then it was my friend, Gina Lovelace, who reminded me of that 5-star review and reminded me, like, Rocky, you are writing for the very person that you like, what you're going through. And so that was helpful. And the other part was, after debuting, and I had to come, like, thinking of my next project. Florence, you're talking about how there's very different points when we have writer's block. And I remember feeling like I have no ideas, like there's nothing here type thing. And then after some months where I decided I was going to go on hiatus, I got off social media for a few months and sort of let myself, and we were during the pandemic, right? I was like, I'm just going to practice being present to myself. And after that, I started 5 new novels. And I think that being able to look back and see that whole roller coaster is helpful, because you can go from a place of, oh, there's nothing here, to like, there's so much here and I don't even know where to start. In the matter of months is really helpful to be able to see.
I wish that had been my experience. I tried to write a second book pretty soon after my first one was bought, I think because I was, my agent wanted me to do it, and it just felt like I had to like seize this opportunity real fast. So I didn't really take any space between that first novel and my second one. And I think that ended up being a huge mistake because I didn't give myself time to think about the story that I really wanted to write. I just kind of came up with ideas that I thought people would like, but that weren't necessarily like what was really in my heart, which I know sounds, it's hard to use a phrase like that and mean it, but I do mean it. It's very different to write from your head versus from someplace deeper, like inside of you. And I think that was something I was experiencing as I was trying to do it all from my head for the first book after my first one. And it took me 2 years to realize that whatever book is going to come out next is going to come out next. And whether I'm going to cry and wrestle with myself and have 2 whole books scrapped before then is like none of my business, because when the right book is going to come out, it'll come out. Yeah, so I guess just feeling, but definitely feeling that fear of like, I only had one story to tell, and now that I've told it, I don't have anything else to say, which is it's pretty horrifying. And then it's also really amazing to realize that actually wasn't true. And I think a lot of people end up finding that. Yeah, I think one overall pointer about writer's block and just being a writer in general is like getting really cozy with rejection and like disappointment, which I know isn't very exciting, but it, I don't know, it's something that people always used to say, but then when my book was not published yet and it was getting denied from agents and all I was receiving was no, 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 I was like, it didn't hit, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't hear it. But yeah, so all of this just to say that I've received tons and tons of rejections on projects, and it was really demoralizing and made me never want to write again. But there only has to be one person who sees a vision for it. And yeah, rejection is part of the game.
What about the best piece of advice or the worst piece of advice you received about writer's block?
I think the worst piece of advice is saying you have to do it this way. Like whatever it is, anyone that says you have to is wrong. and I know that I'm phrasing that as an absolute, but it's because the idea that there's only one way to do something is, I feel, is not, it's just not true. And I think that, so even if it is like, even if it's your mentor, or even if it's somebody like a writer you really respect and they're like, this is the only way, or even if they don't phrase it that way, you might hear it that way. Like, well, so-and-so did it that way, so I have to do it that way. So I think any have tos need to be off the table. And I think my biggest piece of advice, or the best piece of advice, is to play and to experiment. And it really is about what Florence was talking about, is writing from your head versus your heart is a different experience. And I think sometimes, especially when you're in this wonky in-between space, or you were in writer's block, sometimes you really just need to experiment and play and sort of figure out and give yourself space to be able to trip into writing from your heart. Sometimes it sort of takes us by surprise, but we need to be there and present to it. So especially I think as you're getting into like the rejection trenches, which every writer will experience at some point in some way, you know, before you're published and after you're published, is the idea that, you know, you're a writer, and that pressure to perform, you'll always feel it in some way, but you came to the page, you came to be a writer because you loved it. There was a part of you that loved it, and finding your way back there to that play and pleasure is important.
I don't know about any bad advice that I've ever gotten, but I mean, if I were on a ship that were sinking, I would hope that there were lots of stuff around me that floated that I could grab onto. So I try to keep my relationships with people, they're the floaties in the ocean, and they're the, I mean, because ultimately, you know, the worst thing is when you have that writer's block, then you completely have this deficit of confidence and you don't think that you can do it. But as long as you've got like your family and your friends who are like floating that you can grab onto, because they know that you can do it even if you don't. And I think that having that support network with a good agent and with a good editor and with friends who also can commiserate and who know what you're experiencing, that's the way to get through it. I don't know if I've ever gotten any like really horrible advice. But I'm a pretty stubborn person, I think.
I think the best that I received about writing novels in particular was that it's like driving home in a snowstorm and all you can see are like 6 inches in front of you. And that blows, but you can also drive home the whole way that way. And that really speaks to me, especially when it comes from writing from the heart versus from the head. Is it's like if I'm writing from my heart, I don't have to have it all planned out. I just need to be able to see the next paragraph in front of me. And I think, I mean, whoever said it like a lot better. So it's worth Googling. I tried to find it like 10 seconds ago and couldn't find it, but
it's
yeah.
E.L. Doctorow. E.L. Doctorow
It is?
said it. Yeah. So look that up. E.L. Doctorow said that.
I'll throw the link in the chat.
Yeah.
So it looks like we have 5 minutes left, our 5-minute warning. If we don't have one last question, I would just bring it back to the idea of community that has come up a few times, about having a community around you, especially in these types of moments, right? And do you find that you're going to other writers or family or friends, or is it a mix of everything?
I have a weekly Zoom meeting with my friends, my author friends. So every Friday night, we all get together from different parts of the country and the world. Myself, Ellen Hopkins, Amy King, A.S. King, who are both there. A lot of times it's Tobin and M.T. Anderson, Tobin, and Ben Syons. And every Friday we just get together and we talk for a couple of hours. And, and definitely we've been doing this since March of 2020. It definitely has gotten me through the pandemic. And we've also been able to, share what we've been doing in our journeys and how we've been navigating as writers during this time. I couldn't have made it through without those friends of mine.
I think it's really important to be open to forging those relationships. I think there's a lot, especially when you're writing, it can feel like you're isolated, that you're doing it, you're sort of in this boat alone, but no, there are so many people. So I remember with my debut group feeling really connected to them in my MFA program, because I got my agent and then went into my MFA program. And those were life-changing because no one in my world understood what I was doing. They didn't get it. And so finding people that did, it was life-changing. And just to be able to say, I need to vent, or I need to feel excited about this, or I need an idea, or whatever, being able to have that space where people could offer that is so wonderful. And so I absolutely suggest everyone find and be open to those relationships.
Yeah, I agree. You guys said it well.
Well, we've just got our 1-minute warning. So does anyone have last words they want to say?
I do. It was really great to meet you and to hear from both of you. I've been taking notes. I will follow through on the notes I've taken from you. Thank you very much, Florence and Rocky. It was so great to meet and talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, all of you. And this is, I think, this is wrapping up the panel part of the section of the day. And I just feel so grateful for the energy and the generosity of all of the teens and volunteers and leadership. This has been incredible. So thank you for having me. And it's been lovely to meet all of you.